Hello everyone, welcome back to the Technology Innovation Hub. So it's going to be the fifth session on achieving greater career heights or generic career development sessions. Let me share the screen. We have been discussing this slide, right? The slide number 2 on our presentation. And we went through these things and went through almost 3 videos, right? So let's check this one. Key features of early brain development, right? With the time, the feature development, right? The first key feature and brain development period. So if you take a look at the first one, this is antenatal, right, or prenatal. That is before birth. The fetus, right? You know, the embryo, the fetus, those stages are there, right? Prenatal. And you can see even in there, some development happens. We learned that even in the previous videos, it was explained. So what it says, all 5 senses begin to function before birth. That's true, right? Prenatal sensory experiences actually help the brain and nervous systems. Prenatal experiences prime the attachment behaviors of the infant, right? So that's why, I mean, on mother's womb, right, certain set of activities take place. So it's very important to keep the best environment, I would say, home environment for mother before delivery. Right? That's what, right? Before baby delivery, right? Okay, so it's to be a well-planned journey. Then there comes after delivery, birth, right? 0 to 3 years. We know this one now. This is just a summarization of what we have learned, like up to now, right? A rapid period of brain development, which can be fostered relationship with caregivers. You know, like this stage, child can be he may be starting to his preschool and supported by optimal community environments for families and children. Optimal community environment, very important, right? Optimal community, right? Brain development is vulnerable to toxic stress depending on the length, number of stress per child. That's what the previous video explained. These ages it is vulnerable, right? Because it all depends when activity happens, when child demands something, right? How the adults responding. It all depends on that, right? Okay, right. So the next one is school age. There comes after, let's say, 5 years. So likewise, the school age. Children build on the solid foundation for the first 5 years, right? Children build on the solid foundation. Very important, yes. So most of the things takes place prior to schooling, right? We have another video comes in later, right? Social emotional learning begins at home, right? Before schooling, things have done, right? It is almost done in the brain, right? It's almost 5 years, 5 or 6 years, or maybe 4 years when you are going to school, but by 3 years, most of the things are done in the brain, okay? After that, the myelination and the process is going on, right? So it is more difficult for children to take advantage of learning environment in schools if, right, they have not had optimal home environment. Very important, right? There is restricted access to quality early childhood services. They have experienced a poor quality community environment. Definitely we experience this, you know. But that's why, I mean, if you get a classroom of, let's say, 20 to 30 students, different styles, different students respond in different ways. So the reasons are here, very clearly explained. Okay, because at birth everybody has the same brain, right? There's no difference. Genetically it can be different, but it is something else. It will be explained later in the slides. The relationship between the genes and the brain circuit development will be explained. But but the impact is here, the environment effect, the experiences that the child is getting after birth. And adolescence, 10 to 24, brain development prioritize the connections used more often. This is the grooming and pruning, right? You can see pruning. As children enter this period, more intensive resources are required if the children have missed the opportunities for optimal caregiving and environment in preceding years. Yeah, it's trying to develop what's missed in the early age at adolescent. because those things, those children have not gained a certain psychological, cognitive, mental, physical development during the early ages. So now we are trying to do it at adolescent level, but can be difficult, it can be challenging, right? Because in the brain, what comes first is the best, right? The first experiences matters, okay? Because we are talking about fixed circuits, right? Once the circuit is done, it is done. At this stage, especially, right? Early childhood, yeah, it is adaptability is there, but at this stage, it is just a myelination process for selected circuits, right? So we may have to go to some NLP, neuro linguistic programming kind of a thing to rechange those stuff, but it can be difficult. Okay. Right. So yeah, those are the things. Key features, brain development period. Right. So let's watch the last video for this site. This is social emotional learning begins at home, a very important one. So let's go there, take a look at it. This video is from yeah, this ad. I just will that right. Yeah. So this video is from.
Good morning, parents and guardians.
Social emotional learning begins at home. This one, this video channel, right? So it's fairly a new one, right? So 2021 February 12, right? So let's take a look at it. All right, let me play it for you. It's fairly lengthy video, but I'm not going to play the whole thing again. As I explained earlier, the slides will be shared. You can later watch it in relaxed way, right? Okay, right. Just relax and enjoy the video. Okay.
Good morning, parents and guardians and families. Thank you for joining us this morning on our parent training session. Today, Miss Elizabeth Gianolis, the Director of Multiple Tiered Systems of Support, will provide a great presentation on social emotional learning begins at home. So I will turn it over to you, Miss Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and I promise you the most challenging part of this presentation will be my last name. So the rest of it should be pretty easy for folks to follow. So it's Janulis, which is a hard one. But we'll go ahead and get started. I'm really happy to present and share some information with you all today. I know that this time has been very stressful for all of us. So I'm going to share my screen. So let me do that quickly. And then we'll get started, and there'll be lots of opportunities for questions at the end. And if you have a question or a comment, you can also feel free to write it in the chat or even use the raise your hand feature, whatever works best for you. So that way you can ask your question. So here we go. Let's do this, and then let's share. All right. So the title of the presentation, Social Emotional Learning Begins at Home, Supporting Social Emotional Learning During COVID-19. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but let's start with really what social emotional learning is. So social emotional learning is often defined by an organization that really is at the forefront of this. It's called CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, as a process through which we manage our emotions, we set and achieve goals, feel and show empathy, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So that's a lot. But another way that it's often described is as soft skills. But I'd rather, instead of calling them soft skills, want us to think of it as the essential skills. Really the essential skills to be successful, not only just in school, but in relationships, later in work, and just generally in life. Because you can think about it this way. One of our kids could do very well in school, could get into a great college, but are they going to succeed at college if they have a hard time getting along with others? Will they be able to get that job even if they're qualified on paper, if they have difficulty interviewing? Will they be able to have healthy relationships with friends when they're older, with a spouse? So these quote unquote soft skills are really the essential skills for life. So they're really important. Okay. And then I also want to draw some attention to COVID. So it's almost been 11 months. And during this 11 months, it's been a bit of a roller coaster for all of us with our emotions, for us, for our kids. And I want us to think about that. This has been a long time, right? And it's still ongoing. So typically when we're thinking about or talking about stressors, we're talking in the past tense, but this is still ongoing. So I want us just to be mindful of that. Another thing I want us to be mindful of is that during this time and our emotions, they've been like a roller coaster. There's also been a lot of confusion, right? So COVID is something that's brand new for all of us. We don't exactly have a script for it. It's new, it's evolving, and we've certainly have been getting lots of different information. Sometimes that's mixed or polar opposite messages, right? So that's definitely been confusing. Another thing that's sort of unique about COVID is that it's been a big challenge on our support system. So generally when we're going through stress or when our kids are going through stress, we have a really good support network of friends and family, loved ones that we can turn to, or schools that we can turn to. But because of social distancing and some of the unique things about COVID, that's been a bit more challenging for us to lean on our support system in the same way. So maybe we're using the phone or using FaceTime or something like that, rather than having that in person, which is just, we all know, not quite the same. And finally, COVID is unique in that it's impacted our everyday life. So not only distance learning, but if you are working from home, unfortunately, many people have lost their jobs during this time. Everything just looks different, right? And for our kids, we really want to just be aware that their daily life has changed dramatically, right? So they're not going to school in person. Most of them aren't involved in after school activities or sports. They're not necessarily seeing their extended family members who maybe they're used to seeing on a regular basis, or having play dates or spending time with friends, right? So that really puts a lot of stressors on our kids who are more vulnerable to stress in the first place. Okay, so just to sort of be aware of that. So today, when we're talking about social emotional learning and when we're talking about these things, I want us to not think about COVID in terms of, physical safety. Instead, I want us to think of it from the side of emotional safety. Okay, so let's take a look at this together. And this is really important. So this is a typical stress response. Okay, so normally what happens, the typical baselines at the bottom, is that usually when there's a stressor, we have this big resiliency window, and our kids have this big resiliency window, and they have an opportunity and we have an opportunity to calm ourselves before we react and lose it. Unfortunately, during very stressful times, or also during times of trauma, which COVID has been for many of us, especially if we've experienced loss, that resiliency window shrinks. Okay, so another way to think about this is if you're having a really stressful day, so you're very stressed out, maybe work has been stressful, maybe your kids are just having a hard time, or you have a toddler and your toddler's throwing lots of tantrums, and you have a deadline and you're just really stressed out. Normally, a typical thing that somebody does, like let's say your spouse says something to you, and normally it would be a little bit of an annoyance, but you're really stressed out, right? So something that they say, your resiliency windows, it shrunk quite a bit, and you're more likely to what we call flip your lid or maybe lose your cool. Okay, so there's a reason for that. And so if we actually want to talk for a second about the biology of all of it, because this is kind of fun to do with our kids. So you can show your kids that their brain, they can make a model of that with their hand. So all they need is their hand here. And instead of making a normal fist, with your thumb out here, your thumb's going to be tucked inside. So this part is our brainstem. This is the beginning parts of our brain. It's where we don't think, we just react. This is our limbic system, our emotional part of our brain and memory. And this is our amygdala, which fires when we're under stress or have a big, heavy emotion. And this is our cortex and our prefrontal cortex right here. So this part of our brain helps us to stop and think, to have emotional control, to do multiple tasks at once. But when we're under stress, or if there's a big stressor, we can flip our lid. So what I'm trying to say is when there's a lot of stressors, our ability to stop and think and reason and use this part of our brain is really diminished, and we're more likely to do this. So our ultimate goal for our kids during this time is really to give them the tools to build and widen that resiliency window. Okay, so we know that it's probably not its normal size. It's shrunk quite a bit due to all of these stressors. So we want to help them widen it so they're more likely to be able to stay regulated. They're more likely to be able to have those skills that are necessary to be successful in life. Okay, so the big thing to think about is what can we do? And the first thing is probably not what you're expecting, but the most important thing we can do to help our kids is to first take care of ourselves. Okay, this is so important because our kids look to us and look to see how we react and how we respond. And as parents and caregivers, we often think about putting ourselves last on the totem pole, right? We're taking care of everybody else first. We're putting the oxygen mask on our kids first, but just like they say when you take flight, you actually have to put it on yourself first to be able to take care of others. Okay, so some basic things to think about, and these might seem really basic, but I don't want us to get caught and bogged down by when we hear about self-care. It used to be really popular on Instagram and Facebook, and it would show all these people. They would put hashtag self-care, and they would be going to these exotic places or getting manicures and pedicures or getting a massage. It doesn't have to be that extravagant. It really is pretty basic. So we're talking about making sure that we're getting enough sleep, right? So that sounds easy, but I'm sure a lot of us don't regularly get about 8 hours of sleep, right? And that's so important because when we get enough sleep, we're able to be more present and more regulated for our kids. Okay. And so something that's sort of interesting that I like to remind myself of is that if you average, let's say 6 hours of sleep per night, which is probably like a lot of us here, that's actually equivalent to having a 0.1% blood alcohol level. So that's a little scary, right? So we want to make sure that we're getting enough sleep and doing what we need to do to create that environment. So whether that is having some time to relax beforehand, if we're stressed, maybe journaling before we go to bed, turning off the TV, whatever we need to do. Also making sure that we're getting time for movement, right? So hopefully we're able to get outside a little bit and move so we can take care of ourselves. Having time for joy. So whatever it is that's fun and relaxing and restorative for you, that we're carving out a little bit of time for that. And
all right, so as I said, that's a lengthy video, but you can watch it, right? So it's a very important session going on there. So you can watch it as I upload the presentation, then you can just a matter of clicking. Right, so up next, right? So that's going to do this slide. I think it's going to almost come to the end of that slide. Yeah. So what we have next is the influence of genes. Yes, that is what I told you because we'll be discussing this part as well because we have been discussing the brain circuitry, but there comes something from our genes, right? Genes. Right, so that's the initial point, right? So we need to discuss that one as well a little bit, and the genetic brain and all. Okay, so let's discuss that one in the next session. All right, so hope you're having a great time with the videos and all, and you are learning a lot. Okay, I'll meet you soon. Have a great time. Bye bye.